What you are about to see is a documentary of a model of multi-religious cooperation that engages entire religious communities. Taking place in Sierra Leone, a country burdened by 8 years of civil war, the story demonstrates the enormous power of religions working together.
This is the story of a nation whose people endured brutality and suffering for nearly a decade. But this is also the story of a unique group of people who found extraordinary religious tolerance and came together in a quest for peace. In our world, where religious differences can be manipulated to tear societies apart, the story of the Interreligious Council of Sierra Leone is a model of how religious cooperation can be part of the solution, that perhaps it is indeed the last chance for peace. Prior to 1991, Sierra Leone was called the Athens of West Africa and was one of the most prosperous countries in the region. On March 21, 1991, a small party of 100 guerrillas crossed the Liberian border into Sierra Leone. They were led by Corporal Fode Sanko, a former photographer. They called themselves the Revolutionary United Front, or the RUF. The RUF increased their ranks by conscripting or kidnapping young men, and more often young boys, in the small towns they attacked. During 7 years of brutal civil war, the rebels continued campaigns of terror, focusing primarily on civilians in the provinces. Their tactics included drugging their child soldiers and chopping off the hands of villagers. The West African Peacekeeping Force, ECOMOG, were the only force keeping the rebels at bay. The intensity of the constant fighting created hundreds of thousands of refugees spilling over into neighboring countries. But Freetown, the capital, had remained relatively safe, even through 6 governments and 2 military overthrows. On January 6, 1999, that was to change, as the RUF savagely attacked Freetown.
One sister, I think she was either wounded or tired. She could not keep up with the others because they were moving them up and down the hills here. And this sister couldn't keep up. One guy just came and shot her, finished. And let's move on.
Some neighbors came around at that time, but they came at this point and said, "Madam, your house is on fire." Can you imagine how I felt?
He said, "Give me your arm." I apologized for him. I begged him, but he refused to. I said, "Please, I beg." He said, "No." I placed my left hand, which he refused to. He said, "No, I know you are a student," because he saw my ID card, school ID card. So, being that he knew that my right hand was dominant, he said, "Place it. Don't worry, I will chop them all." I placed my right hand, he chopped it.
The invasion of 1999 brought the war to all sectors of Sierra Leonean society. The rebels and the government, backed by ECOMOG, were at a standoff, and there was no end in sight. An exhausted nation was desperate for something to be done.
The country had reached almost the point of exhaustion. The level of violence, intensity of the war, the general insecurity was all around us. And the awareness was that it could continue that way. That way only it would have been, you know, a sure way, straight way to total death, you know, and destruction.
At this point, the strongest representatives of civil society left standing were the religions. 3 years earlier, during a brief period of stability under the newly democratically elected government of President Tejan, the religious leaders had come together to form the Interreligious Council. With the help of the World Conference on Religion and Peace, their aim was to create a unified voice to speak for the human rights and needs of the people. By unifying, they could not be co-opted by either the rebels or the government.
Religious leaders should unite. When you, the leaders, you unite, the people will unite behind you. But when you, the religious man, you be somebody divided, you cannot stand.
We decided to put all our religious differences aside and come to this national issue. since, let's say, almost 95% of the population of this country is either Muslim or Christian.
Weeks after the IRC's formation, President Kaba was forced to leave Freetown by a military junta.
Council members that were here in Freetown immediately got together. They actually had a very strong statement, in support of the democratic process and therefore condemning the violent military takeover.
Although ECOMOG forces were eventually able to reinstate President Kaba, the war continued to escalate, culminating in the January 6th invasion. Immediately following the invasion, the IRC again condemned the attack at great personal risk. In the tense following weeks, knowing the frustration, desperation, and futility of the situation, the IRC began to look towards a new approach towards ending the war. Using their position as neutral leaders of the community, they opened up communications between the government and the rebels. Beginning with a meeting with President Kaba, the IRC were able to open up dialogue with the rebels and the government. They met with Corporal Fode Sanko, who was then still jailed, through the facilitation of President Kaba. They were able to establish confidence with President Kaba as well as Fode Sanko, and to get both parties to make conciliatory gestures towards peace.
During the time we decided to meet some of the rebels in the bush, I was the only woman. It was really frightening. In fact, when we arrived at the meeting place, I stayed inside the vehicle, and then one of the rebels came to me and said, "Madam, could you come down? Don't be afraid of us. We are your children." So you look very much like my mother. And I said, "Okay, we are here to talk to you, one piece now. You must stop fighting, and I want to plead with you to release the children that you've been abducted." I'm talking as a mother. And one of them said to me, "We too want to see our mothers. We've been away for a long time." Then I think it was a few days later that they released about 54 of the children.
I quite believe that the people of Sierra Leone, the group that they should honor or give praise to is the Interreligious Council, because they made it possible for our movement to be in touch with the government of Sierra Leone.
They did an outstanding job in talking to the various factions, in reasoning with them. They even went to the bush at some stage, sat with them on the floor, on the ground, and socialized with them. And in the process, they were able to really educate them on the principles of good living, live and let's live. Their contribution to the peace process in Sierra Leone, in my view, has been inestimable.
For the first time, a religious group was invited to guarantee the fairness and impartiality of the peace process. On July 7th, 1999, a peace agreement was finally signed in Lome, Togo. But the problems of peace were almost as daunting as the war itself.
Grow up without her right hand. This is the product of war.
With the products of this war being such brutality and destruction, for the peace accord to work, the people of Sierra Leone had to accept and understand this agreement.
As a group, they probably have the best network with every village in this country. And if that can be mobilized to work on the reconciliation, the reconstruction, the cooperation, it, to me, has the greatest potential of any similar kind of networking.
The success of this agreement depends on the participation of the citizens, because the success of the agreement hinges on the willingness of the citizens to forgive and to be prepared for reconciliation with the ex-combatants, to allow the ex-combatants to be reintegrated into their communities. This is a very religious community. And this is why when we came back, the Interreligious Council was one of the first groups we called for them to put together all the religious organizations here in the Western area for a meeting for sensitization. Because if you get these religious leaders to imbibe the messages or the contents of the peace accord and get them in turn to sensitize their followers in the mosques, in the churches. This is why I believe the religious people have a very vital role to play.
In a situation of ours where we find ourselves, we have proved, and I do believe that in fact, if there should be sustainable peace, you know, love, reconciliation in this society, it is the council that has to take the lead.
Reconciliation can start only from the victim, not the victimizer. Victimizer all the time talks about reconciliation, meaning forget what I've done to you, and no, and then there's no reconciliation, because the one who's received the hurt must come out and say, okay, I forgive you, and then we go beyond, and there's a new creation.
I want also to state that when we want to bring about peace, since we are saying that women have been very active in war, when we want to bring about peace, we must make sure we involve the women fully.
Yeah, the truth must come out.
So then we've got to focus on how is it that the religious structures embrace the women in their suffering.
We have been having this workshop, and today's topic was on conflict management, resolution, and reconciliation. So one of the tasks for the groups is to have this role play. On the one hand, we have the rebels, the perpetrators of the conflict, and on the other hand, we have people who have been victims of these hostilities, these atrocities.
What don't be, you don't be. Every day when they do bad to God, God they sorry for this.
The role play these women are enacting of the rebels returning to the villages is crucial to the success of the reconciliation of the country. Rebels are now returning to communities that they have ravaged.
If these people happen to come, what will be our outcome? We've already told them that. Let these people come out of the bush. We are ready to embrace them. We are ready to forgive them. Let them come so that we can build Sierra Leone. Yes.
We need to ask ourselves, is it my own interest that should be paramount now? Or do I need to think in terms of the survival of a nation that has been plagued by war for nearly a decade? All of us need to be reconciled with ourselves and with our God. And I'm sure that He will direct us in this arduous task that we have in hand, to rebuild Sierra Leone, to rebuild our lives, and to rebuild our homes.